Johnny Bones Jones, UFC light heavyweight champion in Albuquerque. It's been a lot of my travel lately. I've been back and forth there for the last 5 months and probably going to still be training him for the next 7 months. And, meals was one of the big things that I do. And of course, we work out every day, but he's trying to put on mass, so he needs to eat more food. We want it to be lean mass. And so, but he doesn't like eating the same thing all the time. And he still likes to, go out and shoot guns and take his dogs and take the family out. So he isn't stuck on a regimen as much as I would prefer, of course. And plus we're 7 months out. So, he really doesn't get really strict until about 3 or 4 months out before the fight. So for the time being, I just pulled up the menus of all the restaurants that he might frequent. And that includes McDonald's and Chick-fil-A and, you name it. I just did a search of all the restaurants near his home or near where he was going. And here's what I looked for when I pulled up the menus. I looked for a 2-to-1 protein to fat ratio. If I can get 40 grams of protein and 20 grams of fat, that's a good meal to run with. And that's a good, other than calories, second to only to calories, that's a macro content that I think is sufficient for a healthy individual, an active individual, if they want to improve performance. And that's kind of the bottom line for me. And I picked out those menu items and I snapshot them and I sent them to him and said, hey, if you want to eat at McDonald's, here's what you eat. If you want to eat at Chick-fil-A, here's what you eat. And he has those in his phone. And if he wants to go there, that's what he can choose. I don't eat foods I like. I eat foods that like me. And I make that decision about an hour after I eat. And after a while, you start to like the foods that like you because you're going to feel great. You're not going to be bloated and gassy, and you're going to go to the gym and you're not going to have a shart in the middle of a squat. Those kinds of things, that makes a big difference, when you can go train and your stomach feels good. So I think people just, they get used to the kinds of foods that make them feel good. And then those become their preferable choices. And they start to identify once you discover how good you feel, and then you stray. I always say you stray, you pay. You start to realize that certain foods were really doing a number on you, and then you tend to avoid those. And not because it's not a good food, bad food conversation necessarily. And it's individualistic and dose dependent. People have different reactions to different foods. I just try to get them to pay attention to those, and I kind of made the foundation off of low gas foods. I refer to the FODMAP menu, the fermentable oligodimonosaccharides and polyols. I get them to pay a little bit of attention to the foods that we know from research can kind of wreak havoc in certain quantities and prepared in certain ways that people tend to just feel uncomfortable with. And I saw that firsthand. This is something I came to the research later. I saw that firsthand. I've been training bodybuilders and powerlifters since the late 80s, including women in particular, were the ones that suffered the most stress because they were told to eat those kinds of egg white, broccoli, tilapia diets. And they, you'd go backstage at a bodybuilding show and it was miserable back there. It was, you couldn't, that's where we needed those masks, really, to be honest with you. Not with COVID, but backstage at a bodybuilding show. And so my athletes didn't, they didn't have those problems. They didn't suck down a lot of protein powders and egg whites and broccoli. So they weren't walking around in a gas storm all the time. And what's funny is that when I did have athletes that would eat like that, their significant other would tell me how miserable it was to exist with them because of how bad they stunk all the time. So, and I'm not saying the gas is a bad thing. It's not unhealthy for you, I suppose. It might be for everyone around you. But you just feel better, by making the choices that I suggest. So you're right. I think people, they just enjoy how they feel on the diet. And after a while, they just don't really call it a diet. Those are just the foods that they choose as part of their lifestyle that make them feel good.
Yeah, which is insane. And I love how you spend a lot of time focusing on all of the micronutrients to ensure that someone gets as much micronutrients as they can within a day, so they actually wake up with energy and feel real good. I love that how the vertical diet isn't all just about muscle building and stuff too. It's hitting the micronutrients in order to get as much energy and body function as possible.
And that's still performance. I mean, if you go to the gym and have energy, you're going to train harder, and the cumulative effect of that over time is certainly going to be better performance outcomes. So I did discover that there were certain foods that were pretty rich in micronutrients that just made you feel better. You had more stamina and endurance at the gym, and you could just do more work and recover faster. So I stuck with those foods. It's not really an if it fits your macros kind of diet. It's an if it fits your micros kind of diet to start, at least until you've built the foundation. And I just found that myself and so many people that tried it were like, hey, I have more energy. And that's a win. That's a big win.
Yeah, a really big win. Like so many people are craving for that now, because I find that just, 2021 stress is like the main thing that's coming in, and we want to like defeat that and overcome it. And like eating a diet like yours is definitely helping people to get through that.
Yeah, and I discussed that, I think, in the book, in the diet as well, stress. And I have that YouTube video about stress for success, right? There's some foundational principles, and I don't want to get into, the psychiatry of the whole thing or the psychology of the whole thing. I just think the foundation of battling stress, as I mentioned in the rant, is sleep, exercise, and nutrition. And if you abandon any of those three things, you're going to be weaker to manage the stress, because you can't eliminate stress. I spoke about the fact that you don't really want to, because the more successful you are, the more stress you're going to endure, and you have to be strong enough to manage that. And the strength comes from having those foundational principles, the sleep, hydration, nutrition, and exercise. So just simple things like getting your 7+ hours, taking your 10-minute walks after meals, and eating, again, you're just not eating like an asshole, I guess we can summarize it in such a way. Then you're just stronger to deal with the stress that you have, because there's really no way to minimize the stress. And I liken it to lifting. If you can only bench 100 and there's 200 on the bar and somebody gives you a lift off, you're going to get crushed by it.
Yeah.
But if you bench press 300 and there's 200 on the bar, you're doing reps. And that's my whole idea with stress, is just make yourself strong enough so that it's manageable for you.
Yeah, true. And definitely having a micronutrient rich diet can definitely help that.
You can decrease postprandial glycemia, the blood sugar elevation and duration, by up to 30%, just taking a 10-minute walk 15 minutes after a meal. It's twice as effective as metformin for preventing or reversing type 2 diabetes. That's why you see Brian Shaw and Hawthorne taking 10-minute walks. It's great for their appetite. It's great for their blood sugar. For guys that are that weight, that's one of your primary concerns, is insulin resistance, fatty liver, metabolic syndrome. And so that was one of the initial interventions that I introduced. And I did the same thing with John. And I remember the first conversation I had with him on the phone, a long dead air, when I told him he was going to take a 10-minute walk after each of 4 meals daily. It was just silence. And I realized, he's like, who the fuck is this guy? But we all do it. And he knows now what a big contributor it is, not just to recover from, but prepare for the next training session. Not just from the blood flow to the muscles, but also from the improvement in digestion and blood sugar maintenance. So those little things, which sound like little things, are the things that I do religiously. And that's where we get to compliance is the science. The consistency is what's key. And if you want to know what maybe is different about me than a lot of other folks, is that I do this what might seem like monotonous, boring stuff every single day without fail. To me, it's a habit now. I don't eat without walking. I just don't do it. Never.